This is Chad. I'm talking today a very brief discussion on focal point. Let's get started. Focal point, I mean, it works in art, in illustration, in photography, any kind of really visual art. Focal point is a big deal. It's important to have something for your viewers to look at initially, or they're going to get lost and they're going to wonder where to look, and they'll lose interest and leave very quickly. Here it's pretty obvious what the focal point is right here, right? It's the figure at the end of this pier. There's a few really great things happening here. One is the value difference. Darkest point of the is here. I know these rocks are dark as well. They're kind of on the periphery. But there's other things that help reinforce him being a focal point. One is texture. So the focal point has the strongest differences. So what I mean by that is, see all the rough texture of rocks? It's happening in this area, in this area, in this area. This is the one that's different. So our eye is going to go there. So one, a difference in texture. Two, value difference. I know these are darker, but this is, I mean, adding these things together gives us a good focal point. Three, let's see this line right here, the horizon line. It's a main composition piece, and what breaks it? Boom! It's this guy in the this figure at the end of this rock jetty. So this even establishes it as another focal point. There's another one too that's kind of happening here. Are these lines? These are leading lines that lead to the figure here. And there's one on the edge, but there's also one here. And they're not necessarily leading to him, but they're leading very close to him. So we're getting there in a few different ways. Okay, let's run down to this next one. This next one's focal distance, right? It's like blurriness. So another way is depth of field. Really blurry. Whoa, we don't want that. Really blurry depth of field. We can't focus on that, at least when there is something in super clear focus in our composition. We'll go to this. But we need to make it quite clear what we should be looking at. This curve right here and this curve help. It's called a kind of a target composition, where things are structured as a target, so we're looking at the middle of it, and this is nearly doing that. Okay. So this is obviously our focal point here. It becomes our focal point for a few reasons. One is because of focus. Two, because of shape. There's nothing else around in this whole photo. Three is color. Color is another strong way of determining focal point. And notice this isn't right dead center. It's, if you were to divide this thing into thirds, it would be on a division of those third line divisions. So we have color, we have texture, we have shape, we have focus. A lot of things happening here that work. Okay, so this is a very good one. So the focal point here is the Sydney Opera House. It is for a few reasons. One, it's kind of the dominant shape. Two, it has the lights and darks on it. It has the most interest. And see this leading line right here that takes us along from, there's a few of them happening, but they take us along here and we get back to this opera house pretty easy. If our eye tends to wander down here and look at this detail, we're back. It just keeps pushing us back into this focal point. So these leading lines can also be invisible. They don't have to be physical. So if everyone is looking, if you see a crowd and they're all looking at something, you're going to look to what they're looking at. Have you ever gone out of a building and seen a lot of people looking up in the air and you're like, I have to look up. There's no choice. So those type of invisible lines. Also notice this shape coming along as part in the clouds as part of the composition, and this breaking it. So just what we mentioned on the very first piece, a lot of stuff happening here that make the Sydney Opera House the focal point. Okay, what's the focal point here? Well, obviously it's the leaf, right? It's the odd shape out. So it's the different thing. It's different in color, different in shape, different in texture. We have this repeating texture, and it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of nuances and texture going on, but because this is different, our eye is going to this leaf. Okay, so let's see, we have this line dividing our composition, as we did in a few other pictures in the past, and this this figure is breaking that line. So our eye is going to follow that line and hit and land on the figure. Also, different color, right? Than everything else. We have a lot of natural stone and black and cools, and then boom, this insane pink. Also the only one on a bike. Also kind of a target focal point. A lot of things happening on this one. Okay, so what do we have here? This is a color. Our focal point is this figure out on the rocks. The color, nothing else is red in it, so it stands out. Also, it's kind of the odd one out. We kind of have this repeating line, out and in, and then this is the standout. We also have this invisible line kind of pointing toward the figure, and a couple other lines that are pointing towards the figure. So there's no way getting away from that. Let's see. So this is obviously the big focal point, and I'm not really sure what this one is trying to show. I wanted to show the harbor, so I framed the scene to make the ship look bigger than the opera building. Okay. Well, I mean, it's obviously the focal point. We have a line, this breaks it, has a bunch of texture and contrast, which makes it very interesting to look at. I know the Sydney Opera House is different, but this is larger, more detail. Okay, so it stands out more. Eyes are a great focal point. They're different color than everything else. That's something just as humans, we look at eyes. We focus on eyes. We have since our infancy. It's kind of born in us, so eyes are a good focal point. And when you get multiple things happening, right, the blur, the only focused area, the color, and their eyes, it's hard to get away from that. Okay, let's see. Obviously, this is the focal down here. Why? I would say contrast. We have the whitest whites and the kind of the darkest darks. There's a lot of things to look at and intricacies. There's these rhythm lines that kind of lead us in the waves, lead us to this thing. And it also breaks one of our main lines or shapes. This one's interesting because we have a couple different focal points. Obviously, the face is a big one. I mean, that's another one besides eyes. Faces are something we look at since we were babies. It's just kind of programmed in us. But so we're looking at a face. We're always looking for faces. But this one, we have darker hair framed against a white background. High contrast. It's a face. It has this kind of target composition. The other thing that's kind of interesting is we have these pink shoes. So we have a face, highest contrast, we bounce down to the shoes and then back up to the face. We have a bunch of lines leading us up, but then we go down. So our eyes are moving around quite a bit. Here we have some leading lines. Some are going to her, kind of pointing to the figure, breaking this horizontal line. It's that figure. So a lot of good things happening here. to make sure that she is the focal point. Okay, so I wanted to talk about that. Hopefully that give you a few things to think about as far as focal point and composition.